Throughout history, change has followed a familiar pattern: revolution, reaction, and reform. When industrialization transformed America, it sparked a revolution in manufacturing and power. But the reaction was pollution, exploitation, and environmental damage. Few places reveal this cycle more clearly than the Hudson River. Once treated as an industrial dumping ground, the Hudson became the focus of public outrage, scientific evidence, and political action. What followed was reform, hard fought, incomplete, but powerful proof that society can learn from its mistakes. Industrialization swept the country in the 1920s, and many people flocked to cities. New York quickly became a hub for industry and an integral part of the United States manufacturing. Population increased 56.7% from 10.3 million to 16.8 million. This increase was a result of urbanization and industrialization from the increase in factory output. This was a tremendous time in United States history and was responsible for the rapid growth in the economy. This set the base for New York City to become the fastest growing and most populated place in the US. As a result of the increase in people of New York City, littering became common, and the Hudson River was a common place for people to dump their trash. In addition, there were very little regulations on the Hudson River at the time, so many factories dumped their waste into the river. It was so dirty that it was actually categorized as an open sewer, letting factories and people freely dispose of their garbage. After 40 years of constant non-stop littering and dumping of waste into the river, it was already very dirty and highly contaminated. PCBs have been shown to cause cancer in animals, as well as a number of serious non-cancer health effects in animals, including effects on the immune system, reproductive system, nervous system, endocrine system, and other health effects. Some studies show that pregnant women who consume fish contaminated with low levels of PCBs give birth to low birth weight babies with developmental abnormalities. Children born to Taiwanese women exposed to PCBs were more likely to have delayed development, abnormal lung and skin, and more neurological complaints than normal children. Traces of PCBs are routinely detected in the breast milk of American women. In the mid-1800s, numerous factories such as tanneries, slaughterhouses, and mills were built along the Hudson River, dumping their waste in the river for a century, seriously degrading the water quality. This was because since the 1800s, the Hudson River was an open sewer, meaning factories could dump their byproduct downstream without any repercussions. It was only until 2003 when the EPA banned dumping trash and byproducts into the Hudson River. GM also began to open factories in North Tarrytown, releasing harmful waste and other contaminants into the river for another century. Around 1971, the village's sewer and water superintendent assured that the pollution reports were exaggerated and that he and other residents would swim by a beach nearby. However, Dominic Perrone, an ecologist and former director of the Hudson River Fishermen's Association, was quoted as saying, "You can tell what color cars they are painting on a given day by what color the river is." All the while, General Electric began using PCBs in the fabrication, repair, and refurbishment of its electrical equipment. As manufacturing continued, they began discharging more PCBs into the Hudson. Together, GE and GM dumped more than 1.3 million pounds of PCBs and harmful reactants. It was only until 1976 that the EPA realized, and river control banned fishing. In 1974, the EPA conducted a study revealing extremely high levels of PCBs in fish from the Hudson River. It was incredibly alarming news, and New York State banned fishing 2 years later due to how toxic the fish were. That same year, they passed the Toxic Substance Control Act, TSCA, which banned the manufacture of PCBs, showing how damaging and dangerous they were. Cleanup started in 1977, and among the initial attempts to clean the upper Hudson River was a removal in 1977 to 1978 of 180,000 cubic yards of contaminated river sediments near Fort Edward. The Hudson River had become so toxic and dangerous that it could no longer be treated as a small thing. The federal government declared the contaminated portion of the river, 200 miles long, as a Superfund site in 1984. At the time, and even now, it is the largest Superfund site of all time in United States history, proving how much of a major issue it was. In 2001, after a 10-year study of PCB contamination in the Hudson River, EPA proposed a plan to clean up the river by dredging more than 100,000 pounds of PCBs. The worst PCB hotspots are targeted for remediation by removing and disposing of more than 2.6 million cubic yards of contaminated sediment. The dredging project is the most aggressive environmental effort ever proposed to clean up a river and will cost GE about $460 million. General Electric took the position that dredging the river would actually stir up PCBs. In 2002, EPA ordered GE to clean up a 40-mile, 64-kilometer stretch of the Hudson River it had contaminated. EPA also announced that an additional 2.65 million cubic yards of contaminated sediments in the upper Hudson River will be removed. GE began sediment dredging operations to clean up the PCBs in 2009. This stage, phase 1 of the cleanup, was completed later that year. Over 620 barges filled with sediment were transported to the processing facility on the Champlain Canal, and over 80 rail cars transported the dredged sediment to a waste facility in Andrews, Texas. The scope of Phase 1 was about 100,000 cubic yards. The Hudson River played a major part in water pollution regulations and made public the dangers of pollution. It inspired activism groups such as Scenic Hudson, Hudson River Sloop Clearwater, Hudson Riverkeeper, and the Natural Resources Defense Council, which have continued to push for more action from General Electric. It really brought to light the corporate greed and the outcome that could have been prevented. The actions of local citizen organizations led to the creation of Riverkeeper, a nonprofit environmental organization that grew into a global umbrella organization, the Waterkeeper Alliance. The Hudson River Sloop Clearwater is another environmental education organization dedicated to the health of the Hudson River. Since the beginning of the cleanup, there have been drastically lower traces of mercury in fish. Trends were in line with the recovery that the Hudson River experienced over the preceding few decades in response to the efforts of the activist groups, government officials, and industry are cooperating to help clean up the river system. Because of the activist groups, there were also power plants that closed near the Hudson River, which have been very destructive towards wildlife. In conclusion, although the Hudson River has been exposed to dirty chemicals and all sorts of dangerous substances, it brought upon change with activism groups exposing the large corporations as well as local governments, setting new regulations to protect the natural areas, which in a time of industrial expansion are the most valuable things.